Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Erica, and I'll be moderating today's virtual event hosted by Archbishop Jose Gomez. The Archbishop is also joined live today by Helen Alvarez, Aaron Kiriati, and Cressida Lamas. The purpose of this event is for the Archbishop to hear from you, the faithful, about the ways that COVID-19, the coronavirus, has impacted you and your family. We'll also be paying special attention to three topics: how we pray as a family, the challenges we are all dealing with in this pandemic, and how to build our community through prayer. During this afternoon's event, you'll hear from our panel, which is composed of leaders on these topics, and you'll also have the opportunity to ask questions of Archbishop Gomez about what he's praying for as the Church faces unique challenges throughout the Archdiocese. Before I turn it over to Archbishop Gomez for an opening prayer and a few minutes of comments, I'd like to lay out some general information for today's event. At any point, you may ask a question of the Archbishop or any of his guests by pressing *3 on your telephone keypad by phone. You'll be connected with a member of our team who will take your name and your question. If you are following along on the web, you can use the dialog box below the video stream to submit your comment or question. Given the number of participants on this afternoon's event, we may not be able to call on everyone. If you're listening by phone and would prefer to follow online, you can do so at www.lacatholics.org/bettertogether. You can also press *8 on your phone, and we'll text you a link that you can send your friends and family that would like to join today's conversation. At the conclusion of the event, you'll have the opportunity to leave a follow-up question or comment for the Archbishop or any of our guests. Also, following the event, you can live stream Sunday Mass by joining us at lacatholics.org or facebook.com/lacatholics.org. We're looking forward to a good discussion this afternoon, and with that, I'll turn it over to our Archbishop, the Reverend Jose Gomez.
Thank you, Erica, and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Erica said, let's start with let's start with a prayer, and let's ask our Blessed Mother for her intercession and presence in our conversation. So, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. So let's pray together the Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now at the hour of death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Again, welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us today. It's a special blessing for me to be with all of you and talk this afternoon and share a little bit of what is happening in our lives, in our church, and in our society. As we all know, we are going through very challenging times with the coronavirus pandemic. It's been an unexpected, challenging time. We especially pray today for all the ones that are suffering as a consequence of the coronavirus pandemic. So many people that are sick as a consequence of this virus, and also especially keeping our prayers the people who have died. So many in the world and in our country. Pray for them and for the families in this difficult moment. At the same time, I think it's been a different, special time in our own personal lives and also in the lives of the Catholic Church in the United States, and for that matter too, in the whole world. We have beautiful celebrations here, like the Litany of the Sacred Heart on Good Friday, and then we just did the renewal of the consecration of our country to our Blessed Mother, Mary, Mother of the Church. And of course, each one of us in different ways, we have been working on our own spiritual life and making sure that our faith is so active during these days. Here in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, we have most of the parishes with the streaming of the Mass every day. Here at the Cathedral, we have 2 Masses every day, one in Spanish and one in English. And then, as I said, most of the parishes have this blessing of being able to celebrate the Mass in this difficult time. I know, uh, and I said that so many times, that it's so challenging for us, all of us, for us priests and bishops, and for you all, the faithful, not to be able to physically participate in the celebration of Mass and receive Holy Communion, and also participate in the celebration of the sacraments. It is a big challenge for all of us. I mean, I can share with you that every morning when I celebrate Mass at the cathedral, just by myself, or maybe a priest who is celebrating with me, and a couple of other people accompanying us, and see the church totally empty, is very sad. But I think it is important for all of us to at least have the possibility of participating uh, uh, virtually in the celebration of Mass. And hopefully, as all of us, as what we all decide, we can start the normal way of doing things as soon as possible. I also see a lot of blessings in what is happening, uh, uh, just by the fact that we are able to communicate more in different ways, and that we are, at least that is my own personal experience, and having uh, uh, um, more time to really work on my own prayer life, and also in the way that I try to serve God and the people of God in the Archdiocese and in our country. So today, I'm sure that you have other things that you want to talk about, and I just wanted to spend some time with you all, listen to your concerns, and try to see how can we continue to work together. The church, as we know, is the family of God. We are a family of families, and we are all during this time sheltered in our homes, but we are not alone. No one in the church is ever alone. Jesus goes with us, and we belong together. So no matter where we are, no matter what are the circumstances of our life, God, Jesus is present in our lives, and we are together. We are brothers and sisters in the family of God. So I just want to hear from you now, and I ask some of my good friends to be with me today, to asking for their advice and guidance. So we have Helen Alvarez, Aaron Kiriarty, and Cristina Lamas that are joining us today. Thank you to the three of you for making this time to be together and share some of the things that are part of our daily life, and see how we can continue to work together in our love of God and one another. So I'm very happy that you are joining us and that we are having this conversation. So with that, we can start our conversation. Erica, if you can pause to make it happen. Thank you, and God bless you all.
All right, wonderful. Let's go to our opening remarks. We're going to be hearing from Helen Alvarez first. Helen, go ahead and make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Archbishop. It is good to see you. I do feel lonely not seeing my priests and bishops as I was. So just a couple of introductory remarks. I'm a mom of three kids in their 20s, one of whom is home, two is at a distance. And I've asked myself, what is it about this time that's special and has me reflecting so much about connecting with God and the church? I guess first it's because we really miss our parish, and it makes us feel like we're connected when we're there, and we don't have that except for some very brief times. And the other is to ensure that we remember Christ in difficult times. I know people who don't have God in their life, and they're in a stone cold panic during this pandemic, whereas I know people who are trusting in God at this time. And then, of course, we have the opportunity to use our family time together to particular advantage right now. So that's crossed our minds. I'll be talking later at a little more length about, what it is that we want out of our family time right now when it comes to connecting to Christ. Frankly, I think sometimes we're desperate to pass Christ on to our children out of pride or habit. And maybe we've thought less about the fact that we really just want our children to know Christ, and what would that look like. Finally, I'll be talking a little bit about the difference between the ideal and the real regarding what we can do in our homes, There's time limitations. There's different people at different stages of their life. And there's different ways of interacting about Christ that seem real or convincing to people. Every once in a while, my kids would say to me, you're going along all normal, and then it's like, and now I bring you a word about Jesus. And it feels like you're shoving it at us. And what is real and convincing in your family's life. And then finally, I'll be talking a little later about how important it is to narrate our faith as well as demonstrate it to our children. They're not getting it from, the ambient environment around them. And I mean that from little kids to kids my age, which are in their 20s, and to talk about how we're all called, I think, to be a little bit more verbal and to narrate what it is that we're doing in our faith life, because otherwise they're less likely to pick it up. So thank you, and I'll look forward to talking with you later.
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen. Next, let's hear from Aaron. Aaron Kirati, go ahead.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Archbishop, for the invitation to be part of this conversation. I am a psychiatrist at the University of California in Irvine and direct the medical ethics program here. So professionally, I've been doing a lot of work to prepare our hospital for this pandemic. But also, and more importantly, I am married and father of 5 boys at home. And so I feel many of the challenges of the stay-at-home orders and this very new, very unprecedented time that we're all going through in our personal lives. So what I would like to do a little later in this broadcast is to give you a few recommendations about meeting some of the challenges that a lot of folks are facing in their, not just in their spiritual lives, not just in their professional work, but also psychologically, also in terms of our mental health. Recent surveys are showing that already, because of this pandemic, we're seeing a rise in rates of anxiety and depression, more and more substance use problems, and even rising rates of suicide. All of these things were very big problems for our society before coronavirus, but the current pandemic has made many of those things even more challenging for more folks. So a recent poll, for example, showed that about half of Americans reported that this coronavirus was harming their mental health in some way. So if you're dealing with challenges in this area, the first thing I'll say is just know that you're not alone, that what we're going through now is not normal for human beings. We're not built to stay at home for long periods of time, isolated from other people or unable to work. And this has caused disruptions in our life on the biological level, with sleep, on the psychological and social level, in terms of connections with other people, and exacerbating the problem of loneliness. Many people are finding it difficult to wake up in the morning and find a sense of purpose. They're sort of waiting for this time to be over and watching the calendar or hanging on the news to find out when we can go back to normal. And so in my time later in the program, I'd like to try to help us, without minimizing these problems in any way, try to help us reframe this, not just as a crisis, which of course it is very difficult for us, but it's also potentially an opportunity. So I want to help us think through some ways that we could see this very unusual, very difficult time as an opportunity for personal growth. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aaron. And now let's hear from Christina Lamas. Christina, go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Archbishop Gomez, for the opportunity to join you this afternoon. My name is Christina Lamas. I am the Executive Director for the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry based here in Washington, D.C. I am thrilled to be able to join both Aaron and Helen in this conversation. And as painful as this pandemic might be for all of us, I'm left with a lot of hope of what I have seen in the creativity from families and from colleagues and friends. And so I am hoping that during this time, I can build upon what Helen and both Aaron will be sharing and talk a little bit more specifically about what the domestic church, who the domestic church is, and the 4 pillars of the domestic church, and that all the learnings that we have learned during these past 5 to 6 weeks, that they don't stop, but how do we keep it moving beyond the pandemic that we're living right now? So those relationships, those communities that we've been developed in prayer, they are sustained moving forward into the future. And so I'm hoping to provide some affirmation of some great work that is already happening amongst our families, and perhaps provide some hope and some new ideas of what we've seen across the nation of what's bringing people together, what's building community, and providing people a sense of hope during this pandemic. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christina. I just want to mention again to everyone here on the call, if you would like to get a link texted to you so that you can send your friends and family that link and join today's conversation now, all you do is press *8 on your phone keypad. Also, if you'd like to ask a question in this conversation today, you can press *3 and you'll be able to ask a question live on the call. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our first question. Archbishop, are you ready for that?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. We have Alana on the line, and she is from Sherman Oaks. Alana, go ahead.
Hello, Archbishop. Thank you very much for being here for us. My question is I feel that first of all, this pandemic has brought us so much closer together. This is the way I believe that families should be. We have been so separated. It's been horrific. Like, we're just getting more and more distant from each other. We're so into our work and into getting there, which takes forever. And we've separated or distanced ourselves from our family units, which whoever created this whole thing, which is supposed to be terrible, I don't know if it was Satan and his followers, people that are trying to diminish the society, and or was it God trying to warn us, or maybe bring us together like it's happening? And this is what I was kind of, I question myself about that, because it's a horrific thing around the world, but then you see how beautiful people are and how they're helping each other. No matter how desperate their lives are, they're still out there and they're helping each other out, and they're so grateful for the first responders. And this is the first time in a long time since we've had our heart showing again, We're always so busy trying to protect ourselves from tyrants, from terrorists or whatever. And it seems like we're not hearing anything about that. Maybe everyone's just kind of calmed down and they're taking care of their own family for a change, And that was my question. And then I had a comment. So if you would answer what you believe, I would appreciate it.
Thank you for your question and your comment. I think it is a reality that is happening, that we are in this situation. And as everybody has said, there are so many wonderful, good things happening as a consequence of that. It is true. I think we are more aware of the presence of God in our lives, and the fact that God is close to us. And then at the same time, we are more aware of our families and the people around us. Even if we cannot be close to them, like in my personal situation, I'm trying to be close to my brother bishops, to my priests in the Archdiocese, and also to my family. So we talk more. They're far away. They're living my sisters live in Mexico, but we are in contact all the time, and they are happy that they can participate in the celebration of Mass because it's through the internet, so they can be part of that too. So I think it is true. It's a new reality, and I think our guests can talk about that, how it is somehow God is taking advantage of this situation to help us to feel more His presence, and how we can be closer to one another, as you were saying.
Great, thank you so much, Archbishop. And now let's go to an online question. This question is for you, Aaron. Rachel wants to know, what can I do to support my young children during this time?
Thank you, Rachel. That's a terrific question. Obviously, a question on a lot of parents' minds, and the main answer is to continue doing what you're doing, which is loving your children very much. You would not have asked that question if you didn't have tremendous love for them in your heart. Let me give you just a few suggestions of how I think this might be impacting children. I think children may be absorbing some secondary stress just from overhearing the evening news on the television, overhearing conversations that you're having on the phone with other folks about what's going on with the coronavirus. I don't think we should shield our children from knowledge of what's going on. It's important for them to come to some understanding of what's happening, try to understand it at their level. But at the same time, we have to recognize that maybe too much screen time with coronavirus news coming into the home might cause unnecessary distress for your children. Children need a sense of security and a sense of safety. So I have seen some children who are prone to anxiety or to OCD, what we call obsessive compulsive disorder. Sometimes those symptoms of anxiety or OCD can be exacerbated just by being afraid of contracting this virus. So reassuring your children that we're doing what we can to make sure that we stay healthy, and that we're going to look at this as an opportunity to grow closer to one another as a family, because the primary place where your children will find security is in you. It's in you. It's in their parents, their mother and their father. It's in their siblings, if they have them, and extended families. So making sure that your children also stay connected to grandparents, aunts and uncles, or cousins, if they have extended family, a weekly video chat using Zoom or one of the other technologies that allows us to connect in this way, I think is very helpful for young children, so that just because we're not connecting with those friends or those family members in person doesn't mean that they're gone from my life, doesn't mean that they're sort of out of sight, out of mind. So providing that sense of security in the home is going to come primarily from showering them with love and trying to use technology to keep them connected to family and friends outside of the home. And at the same time, helping them to pray for the world, and the fact that they're worried or concerned about what's going on outside the four walls of your home is a good sign. It's a sign that they care about the folks that are sick. So praying for the sick with them, praying for those who have died as a result of this virus. I think those things can help also remind them of the loving care and presence of God in their life, and God's providence in all of this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We are going to now go to our first poll question. And you can answer the poll question on your phone just by pressing the corresponding number. So the question is, which best describes your answer to the question, why am I a Catholic? Press 1 if it's because I go to Mass on Sundays and I try to be a good person. Press 2 if it's I feel loved by Jesus and I want to follow him wherever he leads. Press 3 if your answer is I'm not sure, I was born Catholic and I continue to go to church. And then press 4 if you've never thought about the question. All right, wonderful. Now we are going to go ahead and go to our opening remarks. We are going to listen to Helen first. Helen, go ahead. You'll have about 10 minutes.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, I'm a mom of 3. I'm also a law professor. So, I'm one of those people who's been able to continue my life from home with students online, and I know I'm one of the lucky ones. That said, I've always thought about how to pass on the faith, and this particular pandemic has really made that question sharper for me. It ends up engaging you as much in self-reflection as it does in reflection about how, now that your family's all together, you do or do not, give a reason for the hope that is in you about Jesus Christ. It really does engage you in a lot of self-reflection before you start, communicating to other people. I think we need to start by asking ourselves, this feeling we have of wanting to make sure our kids are exposed to Jesus, to the Catholic Church. I think we need to ask ourselves whether it's coming from pride, my kids will not leave the church. I will not be the first generation to have done this. Whether it's habit, I was born Catholic. This is what Catholic families do. Or whether actually you have an actual desire for them to have Christ in their life because you have experienced Christ in your life, and you know that it's, of all the isms in the world that have been offered, the one that has offered you the most freedom, the most peace, the most reason for confronting the world. It explains the world around you. Now, you can't wait till you have the perfect motivation or all the perfect tactics in mind because parenting doesn't allow you that luxury, right? We have to be with the family at all times. So we have to think about, in addition to why we're doing what we're doing, how we're going to do it. A first thing I would say is don't forget your spouse. We're constantly talking about our children when we have them, and of course spouses do that too. For the first time in our 35-year marriage, my husband and I are stopping for an hour in the evening and having a glass of wine during this pandemic. This is the first time. And we are really having conversations about some pretty cool things that don't happen as the day rushes by, including about our belief in Christ and why and where it's taking us. Second, it's not only about the people who are, in the bathroom when you need to get in there, or sitting in your living room with the computer telling you to be quiet while they do schoolwork. It's also about your family that's far away and thinking about ways of getting in touch with them. The other factor is that there's a range of relationships with God in every family. I mean, I don't know if my little list here will touch base with yours, but here's some of the range in my family. This is husband, children, everything from strong cultural attachment to our long religious history on both sides. I have someone extremely comfortable living in God's presence, really seeking to know God's will and to do it, and who has incredible appreciation for the church's brilliance intellectually and spiritually. I have someone with philosophical skepticism about the claims of the church, who's particularly upset about the church's stance on same-sex relations. And I have someone who thinks, sure, God is great. That's kind of obvious, but I'm really busy right now. There's school, there's work, there's all this stuff going on. So that's quite a range of people to dialogue with. And so it requires, it seems to me, different responses from me. And again, this may touch base with some of the things you thought, but here's some of the things that come to my mind. First, I'm not just going to do new things because of new circumstances. On the other hand, these new circumstances do provide some opportunities, especially because I'm thinking particularly of my child who came home from grad school for a while, or my kid who's in college. Having the youngest here in particular, I had a priest friend from India who, when he found how far away my son was going for college, he said to me, why do parents in America throw their children halfway across the country to go to school? He goes, in India, we kind of go to the neighborhood school, the neighborhood college or university in many cases. And I don't understand why you send your children away. And I was sorry he said that because it made a lot of sense to me. But this semester with this child in particular has been such an unexpected revelation to be able to see how he's thinking and growing in his 20s. So there are some things that need to be done newly because of new circumstances. So several things. Some are continuations from the past, and some are things that pertain to being home right now. Of course, we always prayed before meals. In fact, to the embarrassing degree that, we'd be at a McDonald's somewhere and everybody stops to pray and people stop and look at you. That's always a given. Now, during the pandemic, we add to it prayers we have family members who are really losing businesses and are going to be in terrible shape when this is over, for people we know who've had corona. So we've just extended that prayer time. I know because I'm not commuting 2 hours a day that I have time for daily prayer. And I let it be known to my family that, I'm, quote, laying a blanket of prayer over them and the world to the extent I can early in the morning. And I'm really able to devote 30, 40 minutes a morning to prayer, a little spiritual reading, rosary. And that's been great. More importantly for the family, I narrate what I'm doing. So whatever comes to my mind, I journal it. I will share it with those far away or those here. If I'm reading about John Paul II putting the bullet that tried to kill him in the crown at Fatima and what that means about the church and about our humanity, I'm reading something about Pope Benedict's new biography. I'm listening to Bishop Barron's daily mass, and I'm hearing him talk about the Acts of the Apostles, like these guys are alive, and we can understand their thinking about how they had to respond to Jesus. So I'm talking about how cool the Acts of the Apostles is. I have one kid who's highly intellectual and very skeptical, and we're in an email dialogue, because we have time, about the Brothers Karamazov, considered perhaps the greatest Christian novel ever written. And we're debating the meaning of the Grand Inquisitor story, where the Grand Inquisitor says that he says instead of rejecting Satan's 3 temptations like Jesus did, he claims that the Catholic Church has decided to embrace them and to dazzle the people with mystery and magic and bread, and then give them bread and circuses in the place of religion. So, man, I am having to do some serious research to keep up with this kid and to have this dialogue. Whereas with another child, praying together for something that crosses their heart may be more important. And for another one, being on the phone and talking about what she's thinking may be more important. I also try to make sure that our conversations about God are in light of things that they're grappling with now, so that Jesus is not, in the church building only when we go there. He's not a thought. He's not words on a page. He is instead something that is the answer to their longing for a friendship that doesn't betray them, or the answer to the question about what is worth doing in their life. And so I have always brought these questions to the big questions about why God made us and what we're supposed to do. And we just have more time for that conversation now. Because Lent crisscrossed with the corona pandemic, and we made almsgiving a much bigger part of our Lent this year. Our local parish priest stressed it, and it really made a lot of sense to me. We talk a lot about what we're sacrificing with the money that we're giving away. And I find it's important, again, to narrate my thinking about this. I think it was George Weigel or some other Catholic commentator who said about passing on the faith that osmosis is over. And so it's really important to narrate what it is that you're doing in order for other people to understand. After we listen to Mass online, and I've been listening to Bishop Barron, we'll talk about the reading, right? And again, it's something I try to have a meal after the Mass that's a bit celebratory. So it's after Sunday morning, or it was after the Easter Vigil. So it makes the Mass and the meal something special. And it's just timing. And, food doesn't have to be great. We just put it on a nice looking platter. That's my secret, right? And whip up a candle. To the extent that we can go to church for adoration or penance or drop off our almsgiving money, I make sure the kids come and reflect at that time. So I guess in conclusion, I would say, to take stock of your actual aims, to take stock of your family and where they are, including your spouse. There's work involved here. It involves your prayer life, and it involves communicating it to your children and your spouse wherever they are. Catholic ways are not just in the air anymore, and I think we have to be explicit about what we're doing so that our family understands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. And now we're going to go to our second poll question. And the question is, what are you most looking for from your parish? Press 1 on your telephone keypad if it's Mass and confession, the sacrament. Press 2 if it's school or religious education for my children. Press 3 if it's a close community or secondary family. And press 4 if it's a support network for dealing with difficulties. All right, thank you so much. I see all those votes coming in. We are now going to go to Aaron for his remarks. Aaron, you are on. Go ahead and give your remarks.
Well, thank you, Helen, for those very, very helpful thoughts about family life. As I mentioned earlier in the show, the coronavirus has introduced a lot of what I'll call disruptions in people's lives to all kinds of things on a basic biological level for us, psychologically, socially, spiritually. One sort of typical pattern that I'm seeing a lot of with patients is someone's got the stay-at-home order. Maybe they're not working. Maybe they're working a lot less than usual professionally. So they fall into a pattern of staying up till 2 a.m, binge watching Netflix and snacking on potato chips. Then they sleep till 10 or 11 in the morning and roll out of bed, kind of stay in their pajamas all day long. They're more or less isolated, very few face-to-face conversations, and maybe a lot less meaningful work than they had before the stay-at-home order went into effect. And this produces a kind of unhealthy recipe with disrupted sleep-wake cycles, very little physical activity, too much screen time, maybe deploying alcohol or drug misuse to try to cope with boredom or to manage stress or to deal with the anguish of unemployment or financial strain. And all of this is going to, if it continues for very long, these kinds of patterns are going to take people down a road where they're going to be at higher risk, not only for problems physically in terms of their physical health, but also their mental health. So rather than dwelling on these problems, I want to use my time here to give you just 7 concrete recommendations, things to think about implementing in your own life and with your own family that I think can go a long way towards addressing these problems. And one way to think about these 7 recommendations is pushing back against or trying to rectify or remedy some of the disruptions that I just described. And a lot of this really involves reintroducing structure, reintroducing a daily or a weekly schedule into your life when those external sources of structure maybe are not in place anymore. Maybe you don't have to get up and arrive at the office, early in the morning, and your daily schedule is no longer set by the same pattern of professional work or school or whatever. So the 7 things I want to focus on have to do with sleep, meal times, work, prayer, physical activity, social connections, and service to others. And in case you didn't write all of those things down, don't worry, I'm going to take a minute or 2 to walk you through each of those. So first of all, sleep. Sleep is extremely important for our physical and mental health. And the one thing that I would recommend for everyone in terms of getting your sleep in order and keeping it maintained is to wake up at a fixed time every day. And maybe on the weekends, sleep in an hour, maybe vary it by an hour, but set a fixed time to get up in the morning. Try to avoid napping during the day. Get your body back into a normal, what doctors call a normal circadian rhythm. That sleep-wake cycle is really important for our overall health. Likewise with meal times. Rather than just sort of snacking all day or eating whenever you happen to feel bored or hungry, making sure that you have a regular set time for meals. And this is connected to the sleep issues. Very interesting. People who shift to a night shift work schedule gain weight eating the same number of calories because our metabolism and our body's ability to digest food is tied to our sleep-wake cycle, tied to our circadian rhythm. So introducing a normal pattern of sleep and normal pattern of meals can be very helpful. Meal times can also be, this can be a golden opportunity for family meal times, which is so difficult with our busy lives where the kids have soccer practice or after school activities and mom and dad are busy. Now when we're at home, the family meal can be the sort of centerpiece of our life together. I have a friend who likes to say that the most important school that your children will ever attend is the family dinner table. And I think that is just a tremendous notion, very helpful for us now. If we're struggling with schooling our kids at home, or if they're struggling with online learning, well, their school is important, but the family mealtime can be even more important. So this is, again, not just a crisis, it's also an opportunity if we're able to shift our perspective. Number 3 is work. And by work, I don't necessarily mean professional work, because maybe our professional work has been curtailed or diminished at this time. And maybe we're even one of those folks struggling right now with unemployment, which is a tremendous burden to carry. But remember that in these circumstances, we can find other opportunities for meaningful work, if we understand that term very broadly, to include things like those home improvement projects that maybe have been on the back burner for several years because we haven't had time to get to them. Or perhaps you've thought about taking up a hobby or learning something. I've always wanted to brush up on my Spanish or learn a second language, or get to that reading list that I just never have time for. Well, if not now, then when? This is a great opportunity to maybe refocus some of our energies on personal development and on meaningful work in the home. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about prayer because Helen, I think, covered this very well. But as part of that daily schedule, including some time set aside just for prayer, both family prayer and personal prayer. Live streaming the Mass can be another way to reintroduce the normal seasonal rhythms into our life, and specifically the liturgical rhythms of the church, which can keep us tied into the community of the church and the feast days and the various seasons that we go through liturgically in our spiritual life. Very important. And also a little bit of time every day for personal prayer, quiet, contemplative mental prayer, a little bit of spiritual reading. Maybe we haven't picked up and dusted off our Bible in many years. So just starting with one of the Gospels or one of the books of the New Testament and slowly, meditatively making our way through that and getting to know our Lord more deeply during this time. Number 5, my 5th recommendation is to try to introduce some physical activity into your day every day. And I'm not going to use the word exercise because that word intimidates some people. They think I've got to, get out there and do some really heavy lifting and sweat, and I'm going to be exhausted. And that just does not seem appealing to me right now if I haven't done that for many years. But a brisk walk around the neighborhood, getting outside. Our sons have taken up doing these workout videos at home. The older 2 were doing them together. Now number 3 is, so again, this can be an activity that gets us out of our isolation if we want to walk the neighborhood or do a little bit of physical activity with another family member that in ordinary times, because we're at work and they're at school, we might not have the opportunity to do that. Number 6 is making sure that we maintain our social connections. And this is one that during this pandemic is going to require more deliberate effort. It's not the kind of thing that's going to happen automatically. So in my sort of daily plan of life, maybe one of the items on there is to call a friend or to call a family member once a day. It doesn't have to be a long conversation, can be a brief checking in, maybe a weekly video chat meeting with my extended family where whoever's available can jump on and reconnect. Utilizing technology like this, either the telephone or video chat technology to stay connected with people, I think is very important. Our country was going through an epidemic of loneliness before the coronavirus pandemic. The former Surgeon General had pointed out that loneliness is as harmful to our health as smoking. This is not something that is trivial, and it's something that is potentially exacerbated by the stay-at-home order, especially obviously if we live alone. So finding ways not to spend all day by yourself is really important. It's important for our mood stability. It's important for managing anxiety. Man was not made to be alone. God created man and women in the garden for life together. And so if we're starting to struggle with depression, if we're struggling with feelings of loneliness, let's think about ways that we can take the initiative, reach out, and connect to other people to maintain those ties during this time. I think is tremendously important for our psychological health. And the final recommendation is also to think and maybe again once a day, just check in on what have I done today to be in service to other people. Who in my life that maybe I've lost touch with needs a handwritten letter or a personal note today? Who in my neighborhood might be at risk of loneliness or social isolation during this pandemic? Can I reach out to them? Can I give them a call? Maybe it's an elderly person in our neighborhood that doesn't have many family left. Maybe this is someone that we need to invite into our family video chat, just so that they have people that they feel connected with. Maybe it's someone who's not proficient in using new technology, so I can enlist one of my teenagers who's very good at setting up these apps to teach our next door neighbor, how to set up something on her phone so that she can stay connected with loved ones. So I think there's all kinds of little, simple, everyday ways that we can be of service to others, starting with the people close to us, literally geographically, the people that we bump into on our neighborhood walk every day, keeping 6 feet away, of course, but saying hello, maybe exchanging phone numbers if we don't have their phone number, and inviting them to be a part of what our family is doing in some way. So those are my sort of positive recommendations. And I'll just close my remarks by a couple of things that I think we should be careful of and try to avoid doing to excess. None of these things are bad in and of themselves, but I think it's important at this time to make sure that we're exercising restraint and temperance with 3 things. One is to limit our alcohol consumption, that we don't get into a pattern of excessive drinking in order to manage anxiety. So I loved Helen's example of sharing a glass of wine in the evening with a spouse. I think that's a great way to enjoy the gift of wine that God has given to us. But as all of us are aware, these things can be taken to excess, and we're seeing more and more people presenting to our clinics with trouble with too much drinking. We should also limit news consumption. A little bit of news is good. Binging on the news all day long and hearing nothing about coronavirus death rates is probably not going to help us and may be harmful to the others in our family. And as an extension of that, limiting screen time as well. If we're tied into our computer all day long with work, I mentioned video chats with friends. Those are a great thing, but we also need time away from the screen. And this is especially important for young people. It's easy to plug them into the video game. It's easy to plug them into the TV to get them out of our hair when we're trying to get some work done. But we also need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on that, because we know that too much screen time, especially for children and adolescents, is not good for their mental health. So those are a few ideas that hopefully some of those will resonate or be helpful for you in terms of helping yourself and your family to cope with some of these challenges. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Aaron. We are going to go ahead and go to a live question before we go back and hear Christina Lamas's remarks. Let's go ahead and take an online question. This is for the Archbishop Gomez. It's from Teresa, and she is asking, when do you think we will have Mass again? Archbishop, go ahead.
Thank you for the question. I don't have a direct answer, obviously, because it depends on the situation or the coronavirus. And I think we want to do it as soon as possible. But I think our main concern is the protection of our brothers and sisters. That's all it is. I think even Pope Francis has given us a beautiful example of how we need to really care about the health of our brothers and sisters. And this illness is so easy to be transmitted to one person to the other that it is important for us to listen to the advice of the public health officials and just be a little patient because, I mean, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, we want to be together and we understand the importance of the celebration of Mass and also the celebration of the other sacraments. I think in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, we are listening to the public officials in the 3 counties of the Archdiocese. So, and we are working with them and see when we can start, first of all, opening our churches, physically speaking, because it's important for us at least to be able to spend some time praying before the Blessed Sacrament. And then as soon as possible, start with the celebration of Mass and the celebration of the sacraments. So let's keep praying for that. I think it is important that we all ask God that to help us that things get better in the controlling of the virus, of the pandemic, that we can restart our parish life as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. And now let's go to a live caller. This is for Helen. Cheryl from Whittier. You are live on the call. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, Helen. My question was, we have 4 adults in our house, and we have different political points of view. And there's so much misinformation. You don't know what to believe. You hear one thing here, one thing there. It causes arguments. It causes stress. With the different. This should not be political, but it has become political. And you don't know what to believe. I got a son that says this, a husband says that. It's like we're all over the place with information, and it's just confusing. It's stressful. We're arguing over what is real, what is not real, what is true news, what is not true. It's messed up. Our media.
I bet Aaron has too, but this is an important. My house, Trump to Biden, and to Bernie. I mean, we've got a little bit of everything. I have someone in the family who belongs to a party called Bread and Roses. I don't even know what they stand for. Here's what we have done. First of all, if you just tell people politics doesn't matter, the people who it's a lot of things are here today, gone tomorrow. The blaring headline on CNN is going to be remembered tomorrow. Sometimes that makes people angry. So you can't tell them if they're really invested in it, it's not important. You can tell them, however, that there is, like you said, a lot of misinformation on both sides of an issue. You can also tell them that it would be a shame. I mean, just again, narrate what you're thinking, that it's really a shame if politics gets in the way of family. I mean, that's a big question out there that we're not going to be able to solve in the confines of the 4 walls of our house. But we do know, you believe, whether the kids believe in nature or God or just some creative force, that we were given to one another in some particular way. We were given to one another, right? Our children were given to us. We were given. It was not to argue about politics. It was to love and care for one another. And to say, yet that some of these issues really can matter to people. I mean, in a political decision, one way or another can have real world effects, but don't let it divide us. I have a who has held, my work Kirk, which heretical in the church against me for decades. And she is near death now, and it's not the slightest relevance to our relationship anymore. It's just all about loving and caring for one another as human beings. Another thing is, I often say to them directly, I'm not here to fight about politics. Let's talk about some principles and facts. Having an argument with an argument. I didn't mean it to be an argument, but I was having a conversation that got argumentative with the child on what he was sort of imbibing about the status of the transgenderism. And I was just asking him to think about it in the way we think about environmental protection, in the way we think about respect for people no matter what, which, if you put all of things together, kind of adds up to the church's position that we respect nature and creation, but we also put first and foremost respect for persons. But it doesn't make any sense to think that somehow in this generation, 2,000 people a week can decide that their genes are unrelated to their identity, that people are getting hurt by this, and we can talk about that, even as I understand what he is being sold in his environment. But we try to talk about facts on that and why we believe what we believe. And to the extent I believe some of the facts that seem to contradict what I hold, I say, no, here's what I think about those. Here's how I reason about them and how they fit into my system. But always that this will not be the most important thing to us in life by death. This cannot break our family up. Let's talk about principles and facts, not just political parties and news stories. They shouldn't have power over us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's go to Christina. Christina Lamas, go ahead and offer your remarks.
Wonderful. Thank you. I hope to be able to build on what Aaron and Helen have shared with you this afternoon. I'd like first and foremost to begin with a question, and so I will end also with a similar question. And so my question for you this afternoon to reflect and not answer at the moment for yourself, but to carry with you is, what kind of faith do you want your children to have 30 years from now? And for those of you who have children who are in their 30s, think of even beyond. What kind of faith do you want them to have 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And reflect that for yourself in the next couple of days and see what response you might get for yourself. I ask that question because I think it's at the core of our own faith, our own journey in our faith and in our relationship with Christ. When I was young, my mother had this desire and a wish for myself and my younger sister to become a religious sister. And so she did everything possible. She would take us to different retreats at the parish. She would take us to different prayer groups. Every Thursday, we would be at somebody's home praying the rosary. We'd be opening up the scriptures. She had this desire in her heart for this vocation for religious life to grow within us. Unfortunately, that did not happen for my mom. I did not become a religious sister. I ended up getting married, and I have a beautiful 9-year-old little girl. And that was the route that God took me through, and that's where my vocation is at, is as a mother. However, I give thanks to my mom for that desire that she had many years ago, because of those seeds that she planted in my own heart, allows me to have the relationship that I have with Christ now. And now as a mother, I have this desire for my daughter, when she's 30, when she's 40, when she's 50, to have this strong connection and relationship with Christ. And I know that can only happen if I can model, if I can witness, and I can help guide her in this process. I don't know what it's going to look like for her when she's 40, when she's 30, but I'm left with the conviction of knowing that I am trying. And so that brings me to Pope John Paul II during the Second Vatican Council, in which he emphasized the dignity of the Christian family. And he talked about holiness being found in the family and in the monastery. And according to the council, it said that the family is a domestic church where parents should, by their word and their example, be the first preachers of the faith. And we've heard that echoed numerous times by Pope Francis in focusing on the importance of the family, and where the home is the place where their children first learn about God and the love and example of their parents. And I think this pandemic that we're experiencing now has provided endless opportunities and heightened the need for that to become the case, where we as families, as parents, we recognize that our homes are and is the domestic church. And so maybe that's a term that you've heard loosely mentioned a couple of times. And so what I'd like to do is offer you the 4 pillars of faith. And I'm hoping within these 4 pillars of faith, it finds an affirmation of what you're already doing in your home and how your homes are already the domestic church, an extension of our church, our universal church, an extension of the sacramental and liturgical life that is happening in your homes and that is supported by our parishes, by the different ministries, by the clergy, and that they're here to help us pass on the faith to our children. But it starts with you. It starts with me and having this desire for our children to have this faith. So the first pillar is family life is sacred. So take a moment for yourself to imagine your homes. I find myself in my home. I've been here for the last couple of weeks, as many of you. I found myself one day to the next becoming a full-time teacher, trying to help my daughter as she's now transitioning to online learning, but also working probably more than I should be at home. And so, Erin, thank you for your suggestions. I do need to look at how much time I'm spending working and in front of a screen. But I do find myself now carrying on two roles and trying to manage and to balance. But as I look and I see my home as a domestic church, I also recognize that my life here in my home and all the activity that takes place is sacred. So imagine from the moment that you open your door and that you step foot into your home, every activity is sacred. From every conversation that takes place, from every passing of a hello, from every argument that's taking place, it is all sacred. So for me, when I come into my home, or when I used to come into my home, now when I leave my bedroom and walk out and say good morning to my family, is to recognize that my family is sacred, my home is sacred. So how I refer to my parent, my daughter, and my father, who he's currently with me right now, but how I greet him, how I say hello, how I treat them, it is all sacred. Now, I'm not perfect, and I have found myself during this pandemic testing my patience even more. I found myself asking for forgiveness of my daughter. I found myself saying, I am sorry, I lost my temper. I'm sorry, I didn't keep my promise. And that is all holy, that is all sacred, and being able to acknowledge it and recognize that our family life is also sacred. Pillar number 2, family activity is holy. So all these new and innovative and creative ways that you are reaching out to your families, it's all holy. So think of the family activities, the game nights that you're probably now playing. I know we have. For 2 weeks, we had a 500-piece puzzle that just sat on our kitchen table. And every time I came down from taking a break from my office, or my father just decided he wanted to spend a couple of hours, we all took a piece and putting this puzzle together. And that activity is holy. Think of all the outdoor activities that I've seen across social media, these creative and innovative ways. You have parents now who are creating these amusement parks in their backyard, and their children are experiencing joy and laughter in ways that we've never experienced before. All that activity is holy. We have found myself as a family every Sunday leading a family pray and fun activity. And so from early on, the pandemic began, I reached out to my siblings. I live on one coast and they're on the other coast of the nation. And I said, why don't we gather once a week to check in with one another and to pray together? Now, granted, my mother raised 7 of us, and I can't say that all of us are 100% religious. I can't say that all of us are going to church every single Sunday or praying every day. And so by reaching out to my family, it was a little bit of a risk on my end, not knowing how they were going to respond. But they all positively affirmed the idea and said, yes, let's do it. And for the last 7 weeks, we have been gathering as a family via Zoom, and we spend time breaking open the scripture. In my 40 plus years, I have never done that as a family, and now we have. And it's a beautiful experience to see each other break open the scriptures and then to turn to a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old and to be catechized by them. They have a whole different interpretation of the scripture, and it moves me to know that this is how we're passing on the faith. This is where God is here in our homes. And how can we continue to pass on that faith to our children? Then we spend some time playing some games. We've done scavenger hunts. We've done Simon Says activities. We've done some bingo games. And it's just opportunities for us to connect and interact in ways that we've never done before. So all the activity that you've been doing as a family, take a moment to honor it in the messiness as we have found ourselves, because that activity is holy. The third pillar of the domestic church is that families have a unique ministry. And so I encourage you to take an opportunity to look at all the strengths of the family members that you have. Every single one of us has received a gift from God, and all of us are gifted in many different ways. And so how do we pull our gifts together and find a unique ministry for us to be able to do something? I'll give you an example of a family that I know that has moved me in the way in which they have found a blessing in the different ministries of how they're carrying it out currently during this pandemic. So this family came together early on in the crisis and recognized that they had the gift of sewing and they had the gift of wanting to evangelize. And so they put out an announcement on Facebook and said, you know what, we're going to make face masks. And so they began to take orders. They didn't charge. They had somebody donate all the fabric, and they began to make face masks for anyone who needed a face mask. And so when this face mask arrives at your home, there's a beautiful passage, a beautiful scripture, a beautiful message of hope. So now not only are you receiving a gift, but you're also receiving an affirmation and some hope and uplifting prayer. As you wear this mask, you think of this family. And so here is a family who, looking at all the strengths of their family members, decided here is a ministry that we can do as a family. I've known families that have gone out to deliver groceries for those who cannot. I've known families who've begun prayer chains for different members in their parish community. As a family, we're all called to discover the ministry in which we can give back to others the goodness that God has given to us, and that can only be discovered in the gifts in which already reside within our families. And finally, the fourth pillar is that we as families are called to be an evangelizing community, that by our baptism, we are to nurture that faith that we have within our homes outside of our homes. So how can we share it? Share it through social media, share it through our extended family, share it with our friends, so that Christ may be known to others as Christ has been revealed to us. And so as you look at your activity, both in your homes and outside of the homes, recognizing that you and I, are the domestic church, and that during this pandemic, we have been gifted an opportunity to pause and to take an opportunity to recognize the dignity and the value that we have as a family, and how do we continue to embrace our faith, welcome Christ into our hearts, welcome Christ into our families, and continue to spread that beyond these four walls. And my hope and prayer is that when we leave our homes and we're able to join our parish communities, that we're able to take this newfound discovery of our domestic church and look for ways in which the church community, our parishes, can support us, and that we can go to our ministers, that we can go to our clergy and be able to share this rediscovered notion that we too are the domestic church. And here is the value of how we can pass on the faith as from a mom, from a dad, from a child, from a grandparent. And so I come back to the question that I asked you earlier. 30 years from now, what kind of faith would you like your child to have? Except I'm going to rephrase it. Knowing what you know now, knowing that what you've lived through the pandemic, what would you do different in 30 years from now? So when you look back in 30 years, your children can say, I remember when mom and dad, I remember when my grandmother, I remember when my sibling. So let me rephrase that question for you. Knowing what you know now, thinking 30 years into the future, and you look back at this moment, what would you like to be remembered from this moment? What is the highlight that's going to most stand out in the minds of your children, in your own minds, those of your parents, of your siblings, from what you did in this moment? So I leave you with that question, and I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing as a family, knowing that it's all sacred, knowing that it's all holy, knowing that each member has a unique ministry in their family, and knowing that we are called to evangelize beyond our homes into the world, so the love that you feel in your hearts can radiate beyond your families. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Christina. We are now going to go to an online question, and this is for Archbishop Gomez. Sophia wants to know, what do you think is the most important thing for families to be praying for at this time? Archbishop?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. Obviously, I think it is important for us to pray for the people that are suffering on this time. There are obviously many things that we can pray for. The most important, I think, it might be that we as a church renew our commitment to be faithful to God and to be missionary disciples. Obviously, as I said before, we need to pray for the people that are suffering, the ones that, uh, um, as a consequence of the coronavirus, are sick, the ones who have died. And also, we need to pray, as I was saying before, that we can go back to our normal way of doing things. So all of those things are there. But I think it is important for us to really take advantage of this moment and pray for each one of us, for every Catholic, that we really become missionary disciples and be faithful to our vocation. Uh, and please do that through the intercession of Mary of Blessed. I think if we pray for that, then we can really change the world. I think that's what we are called to do, as you know. And there are many challenges in our society, and in this time, I think it's in a sense a blessing from God that we reflect more on what is our call and what is our vocation, and we really be together and change the world and bring the joy of the gospel to the presence of Jesus to the people of faith.
Great, thank you so much. Let's go ahead now to our poll question number 3. And it's, what best describes the role of faith in your family? Press 1 for we pray together and often talk about God in our daily life. Press 2 for we say grace at dinner. Press 3 for we make time to pray together. And press 4 for we do not pray together as a family. Again, you can just do that right on your telephone keypad. And we are almost out of time. If you would like to give any closing remarks, Archbishop, before I go ahead and give everyone information and resources, you may go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Erica. First of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I think it's been a very special month for me personally, and I hope that for all of us. Thank you for the questions, and especially thank you to our panel, Helen, Ern, and Christina. Thank you very much for joining us and for helping us to see what is the best way to continue to live this challenging time. I think your remarks are extraordinary, very helpful personally to me, and I hope to everybody else. And so let's keep praying together during this challenging time. So let us remember. I was thinking that there are two things that kind of phrases that we talk a lot about. One is the one that Christina presented on the domestic church. I think this is a special time where we can open our hearts, the understanding of how important it is family life in the church and in our own personal lives and in our spiritual lives and in the way that we transmit the faith. It is important, and it's happening. It's just beautiful in each one of your families, of all of you participating, and with the advice of Helen, Ern, and Christina. This is really a very practical way of making it happen, that there is a domestic church, and it is here. The other thing is a phrase that I talk a lot about and we hear about is the digital continent. How we have to evangelize the digital continent. In the same way that the missionaries came to the American continent, now we have to evangelize the digital continent. And I think we are living it right now because we have no other option but to be connected to the internet. So I think we are learning a lot on how to do it. And I think we have to really have this new desire to be present as a church, as Christians, as Catholics, and helping people to discover the love of God with this new instrument that we have. So we are the family of God, as I said at the beginning. I want to assure you that I'm praying for all of you, and I ask for your prayers for my ministry here in the Archdiocese and in our country. And let's be stronger as we feel that we are always together, that we are really the family of God. I was thinking that we kind of put together this prayer to Our Lady Guadalupe in the time of the coronavirus. So I hope that we have the time to pray it. I'm not sure that you will have it in your screens, but we're going to pray it, and hopefully It's something that we feel that is coming from our hearts, asking our Blessed Mother, Our Lady Guadalupe, to help each one of us, our families, our country, and our world in this challenging. So I'll pray for you all. Holy Virgin of Guadalupe, Queen of the Angels and Mother of the Americas, we fly to you today as your beloved children. We ask you to intercede for us with your Son, as you did at the wedding in Cana. Pray for us, loving Mother, and gain for our nation and world, and for all our families and loved ones, the protection of your holy angel, that we may be spared the worst of these sins. For those already afflicted, we ask you to obtain the grace of healing and deliverance. Give the Christ to those who are vulnerable and fearful, wipe away their tears and help them to trust. In this time of trial and testing, teach all of us in the Church to love one another and to be patient and kind. Help us to bring the peace of Jesus to our land and to our hearts. We come to you with confidence, knowing that you are truly our compassionate Mother, help to the sick and cause of our joy. Shelter us under the mantle of your protection. Keep us in the embrace of your arms. Help us always to know the love of your Son, Jesus. Amen. And let me finally give you a blessing that we all feel the presence of God in our life. May Almighty God bless you, your families, the ministry, and during this time, it will be a moment of grace for each one of you as we continue to be faithful to God and committed to our becoming missionary disciples. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Thank you all.
Amen.
Thank you, Archbishop, and thank you everyone for participating in today's conversation. I want to remind everyone that you can stay on the line after this event if you still have a question or you'd like to share your opinion regarding anything we have discussed this afternoon. Also, please join us in spiritual communion tomorrow on our live stream at 7 o'clock a.m. for Spanish Mass and 10 o'clock a.m. for Mass in English. Also, please visit the website lacatholic.org/bettertogether to find resources to support you and your family and to sign up for Always Forward, a daily newsletter offering Catholics news from our local community and across the globe. You may also contact us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at LA Catholics. Thank you everyone for joining. This concludes today's event, and God bless.